Those commercials were lame, right? If you like My Funeral Home Stories and want to listen commercial-free, go to myfuneralhomestories.com and get Collection 1. That's seasons 1 through 3 plus an exclusive 45-minute journal entry for $8. Please consider going commercial-free. This is the best way to support My Funeral Home Stories, and it's also the best way to listen. It feels like the audiobook I want you to hear without a bunch of stupid commercials. I hate that you have to fast forward through commercials to listen to My Funeral Home Stories, but it's a necessary evil. I just want to write stories about dead people. So go to myfuneralhomestories.com and get all 17 of my fucked up stories, plus that shotgun suicide highway pileup of a 45-minute epilogue for $8. All this money goes back to me, the creator, not a third party. You have no idea how much this actually helps. Anyway, enjoy this episode.
The following account is real. Names have been changed to protect the living and the innocent. This journal contains language and content that may not be suitable for all listeners.
Every town has their urban legends. Parents telling their kids stories about strangers in cars with candy and other made-up tales to instill fear in their children. My parents were no different. Why would they be? When I was little, I remember my parents telling me about kids being severely injured by fireworks. One kid in particular stands out. Little Mikey Stevens. Apparently, little Mikey was fucking around with some firecrackers under a bridge and blew most of his fingers on his right hand clean off. I don't remember where I was when I heard the Mikey Stevens story. In the car, by the pool. It doesn't matter. Once I heard the story, the jury was in. Fireworks were now something I was afraid of. And they would be well into my 20s. That's when I realized how much fun being reckless with fireworks could be. Regardless, the Mikey Stevens story left its mark on me until I met Joanne Parr. Well, picked up Joanne Parr. I'll tell you what, hearing a story about some careless kid losing a couple fingers doesn't scare me nearly as much as seeing the back of a petite retired pediatrician's skull opened up and leaking brains and blood out onto a pristinely manicured lawn in front of her family and friends. Seriously, the back of her head was blasted off by some drunk asshole playing with a historically accurate replica war cannon 4 houses down. Joanne was just minding her own business when bang, lights out. Joanne's head makes the Mikey story seem cute and trivial in comparison. Sorry, Mike. A couple of fingers is scary and all, but Joanne Parr fucked up fireworks forever for me. And maybe she'll do the same for you. My name is Grant, and these are my funeral home stories. Chapter 13, Independence Day Brain Exploder. It's July 4th. I'm 15 years old, going into my sophomore year of high school. My eyes are closed, laying in bed next to my yellow lab, Carter. He's asleep. Out cold and snoring. I can hear him snore at every third or fourth breath. I'm jealous. I had drifted off for several minutes, but was brought back to consciousness by the sound of what I can only imagine to be 4 12-inch subwoofers packed into a puny 2-door Honda with some sort of body kit parked in someone's front yard. It's oddly specific, I know, but there's a reason. It's my hillbilly neighbors blasting some Toby Keith or equally whatever country artist. Whatever the music is, its persistence is nauseating. Thump, thump, thump. Occasionally the sound of slide guitar or some hee-haw lyrics bleed into the muffled mix. It wouldn't bother me as much if they were listening to something of musical substance, but they have a Jeff Gordon flag hanging in their open carport visible from the road, so I doubt they have a copy of Stankonia laying around. I clench my fists out of pure frustration, but I haven't opened my eyes yet. There's still hope. I exhale deeply, relax my fist, and try to will myself back to sleep. I stayed up a little late last night, blowing up trash cans and other general holiday weekend fuckery. And I didn't get to sleep in today because I rode in with my dad to check in on the funeral home early this morning, 7 a.m. early. My dad barged into my room at 6:30, waking up Carter and I, and asked me if I'd like to accompany him to the funeral home this morning. How thoughtful. I'm just kidding. He actually said, "Wake up, you're not sleeping all day. We're going to the office." He knew I was up late, and I can tell he gets a kick out of making me wake up early when I don't have to. Thankfully, I'm not as tired as I could be. Since I'm not old enough to drive, I'm not on call after hours. I only go on death calls if they happen while I'm at work. Simple home, hospital, and nursing home calls. Nothing really to write home about. I did see a shotgun suicide that came in a few weeks ago. That was a trip. I didn't see it at the crime scene though, just in the operating room. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I mean, it was fucking terrible, but it didn't really gross me out. I think I may actually be getting conditioned for this line of work. It only took 2.5 summers. Not bad. Fun fact, because of my lack of driver's license, I'm the only person working at the funeral home who actually gets nights and weekends off. Oh, and holidays too. All the other employees are trading nights and weekends to make removals and work visitations. Meanwhile, my mom picks me up at 3 o'clock every day so I can go home and practice drums and play with my dog. That's a pretty gravy schedule next to that every other night, every other weekend shit. Something to note while we're on the subject of work schedules and holidays. Most funeral homes don't open up on major bank holidays. Directors and staff are still on call, but since the cemeteries aren't open, there isn't much we can do except make removals and embalm. I suppose you could have a visitation on Independence Day, but most people choose not to. I mean, who wants to go see a dead body and a bunch of crying people on a national holiday? A national holiday that's synonymous with getting hammered and blowing shit up outside. I just think turnout would be kind of a drag unless we could figure out a way to celebrate and mourn at the same time. Perhaps we strap Grandpa to a rocket or pack his casket with explosives. That could be interesting. I'm sure someone somewhere does it, but we don't. So we get days like today, Independence Day, off to rest and relax and nap. Or attempt to nap. The thump of my neighbor's music keeps getting louder. I finally open my eyes. I try to reach from where I'm laying to close the window behind my head so I can go back to sleep in silence, but it's too late. When Carter felt the bed move, his tail immediately began wagging, and within 2.3 seconds, he was standing over me, licking my groggy, grumpy face awake. Carter's tongue slides through my lips and grazes the back of my molars. Ugh, what the fuck, dude? I push him off of me. I slide the window shut and the bass dips in volume. I flip over on my side, away from Carter, and close my eyes. I feel my head and neck start to melt into my pillow. My dad walks into my room, banging the door against the stopper to get my attention. Get up, Buck. There's a police call at the lake. Lindsay will be here in 10 minutes. My dad notices my teenage 5 o'clock shadow and says, "You need to shave." He points toward the bathroom. Confused, I say, "But, Dad, I'm not on call." My dad scoffs, finding it amusing that I think I have a say in the matter. "You're on call today, bud." He leaves my room and walks down the hallway. I'm a little too groggy to put up a fight, and honestly, I'm kinda stoked that I have something to do now since my neighbors aren't making it easy to sleep. Plus, it's a police call at the lake. Color me intrigued. I bet it's a drowning or like some sort of boating accident. This realization perks me up a bit. Listen, it's not that I want bad things to happen to people, but if I'm getting called out to do something, I want to see something I've never seen before. Is that too much to ask? Everyone else at the funeral home has these cool and bizarre stories. I got nothing. Just stories of little old grandmas and grandpas surrounded by their loved ones being sent off to wherever it is we go when we die. Either way, this is more interesting than what I had planned for this afternoon, which was nothing. I roll out of bed and head to the bathroom. Come on, Carter. 3 minutes, 1 dull 2-blade razor, and 4 fairly superficial cuts on my face and neck later, I was covered in tiny pieces of toilet paper waiting for Lindsay to pull up in the van, sitting in an oversized brown leather wingback chair in my parents' living room. I check to make sure one of the dangling pieces of toilet paper I used to cover the cut on my Adam's apple is still there. I feel a section of non-blood-soaked paper brush against my fingertip. I feel relieved knowing that I'm not bleeding all over the collar of my white Express men's dress shirt. I'm wearing a charcoal suit of the same make as the shirt. My tie, belt, and shoes are nothing extraordinary, but they're tasteful and appropriate for the weather. Carter is sitting on the floor staring at me from the other side of the room. Every time I break my gaze from the window to look at him, he wags his tail frantically, but still pressed firmly against the floor. He's looking at me with the saddest eyes, knowing he can't come sit on my lap. Carter is the greatest dog I've ever had, but I swear to God, if I even look at him from across the room in a suit or dress clothes, I'll be covered in fine white yellow lab hair. And then I'll be forced to spend 4 or 5 minutes frustratedly sticky rolling myself, to mostly no avail. My dad pops his head in. Looks like you nicked yourself a couple times. You know what this call is, Dad? No, not really. Lindsay knows where you're going. Have fun. Carter and I hear Lindsay pull up at the same time. He runs to the door while I quietly stand up, check for dog hair, and hastily sneak out the garage door while Carter's still watching out the front. All right, no dog hair. Walking up to the van, I can hear the album version of Wolfman's Brother by Fish through the door. Lindsay's always listening to Fish. It's kind of awesome, but it can get a little annoying when we're listening to our third 18-minute long version of MoMA Dance of the day. I smile and wave while simultaneously remembering to peel 3 of the pieces of blood-soaked toilet paper off my cheek and chin. The cut on my Adam's apple hasn't clotted up yet. I better leave it on a little longer. Lindsay turns down the music when she sees me and unlocks the door. I get in. We're on our way now. Now that I'm actually more awake and in a moving vehicle, I'm actually pretty excited about going on this death call. I got my feet wet a couple years ago on my first real police call. The foreign exchange student stabbed 77 times in front of the hot and fresh. Now every time I hear the phrase police call, I get nervously excited because I might see something new, something brutal and disgusting, but equally fascinating. I think Lindsay can tell I'm in a good mood as we pull out of my neighborhood. She slaps my shoulder and points at my neighbor's house. You know, the neighbors with the Jeff Gordon flag and the terrible country music that kept me from my nap. Check out those bubbas, she says, snickering. We see 2 middle-aged men with ball caps and beer bellies sitting in folding chairs next to a cooler in their dirt and gravel driveway. Sitting beside them is about a quarter pallet of fireworks. They're probably having some sort of 4th of July blowout later. As we pass, I think about how loud that pallet of fireworks exploding all at once would be, and then I think about the Mikey Stevens story and wonder if Lindsay's familiar with it. Both the men sitting in the driveway wave at us as we pass. We choose to ignore them. Hey, Lindsay, have you ever heard about a kid that blew his fingers off with fireworks down by the covered bridge? Mikey Stevens? That's an urban legend. Every town has a Mikey Stevens. We had that story in my town, but the kid blew his hand off behind the bowling alley. Ah, I say out loud, realizing how stupid and naive that question probably made me sound. We've been driving about 15 minutes now, and we're just about to the house. I don't know this. I'm just repeating what Lindsay told me 2 minutes ago. When I asked her if she knew anything about the call, she told me she didn't get much information from dispatch. Here's what she got. Name, Joanne Parr. Age, 73. Address, 2365 Studebaker Lane. We also know that the police have been on the scene since 11. It's 12:38 now. Lindsay didn't get a cause of death, but she suspects either drowning or a heart attack based on Joanne's age. That shouldn't be too bad. A little disappointed she didn't promise me something gorier. I look down, notice, and remove a single yellow lab hair near my right elbow. I slip it out my open window while we move. My thoughts are all over the place as we're weaving deeper into what I can only identify as the woods. There must be a lake around here somewhere. I can smell it. So did Joanne have a heart attack, or did she drown? I hope it was a heart attack for her sake. I couldn't imagine drowning as a 15-year-old, let alone as a 73-year-old woman on the 4th of July. I'm imagining what it would feel like to know that you spent your whole life inching toward that moment when you made a mistake and found yourself stuck underwater. What do you suppose is going through your head when you know you're moments away from breathing in lake water, ending your life? Do you think about your family, your pets, your accomplishments, your regrets? Or do you just think about how fucked you are in your current circumstance? Probably all of the above. I'm sure most people pass out from holding their breath and then inhale the water while they're unconscious, but I wonder how many people understand their plight and actually choose to succumb and just breathe in deeply. I can't even imagine the sensation of water filling your lungs. The burn and pressure inside your body must be excruciating. I had a lima bean go down the wrong pipe 2 nights ago at dinner, and I thought I was done for. Lindsay slows to a stop before turning onto Studebaker Lane. There are 6 police cars about 2 blocks down the street. Lindsay and I notice the flashing lights at the same time. That's a lot of cops, she mumbles. Hearing the surprise in her voice excites me. Not quite what she expected. This many cops on a small street is actually pretty alarming. What the heck happened to Joanne to merit all these police? Lindsay drives towards the police cars, and a friendly, good-looking sheriff's deputy in his late 20s flags us down. Lindsay stops and rolls down her window. The sheriff's deputy proceeds to break down the scene. Joanne Parr, 73, severe head trauma. She was sitting on her lawn having a cup of coffee with her children while her neighbor 4 houses down primed a Revolutionary War-era replica cannon at water's edge. Joanne and her family were sipping their warm coffee and chatting. completely unaware that some history buff in a crummy lake cottage down the shoreline accidentally overpacked his completely unnecessary cannon with too much explosive powder. Joanne had just finished telling her family how nice retirement was when, boom, her head jerked forward and body fell off her chair and onto the ground. So their neighbors shot their cannon at them? Lindsay interrupts. The officer shakes his head. No. The cannon exploded and a piece of brass about 3 inches long flew over 3 yards and slammed into the back of her head. And now there's just a big hole back there. I get out of the van and help Lindsay pull the stretcher out of the back. Lindsay looks at me and says, "Hold on." She reaches her hand out and I feel her fingers touch the piece of dangling toilet paper hanging from my Adam's apple. She tugs the toilet paper and I can feel the blood that's acting as glue give way with a sting. "Can't have you going in there like that." She giggles as she grabs the steering end of the stretcher. "Let's go." We had to park about a half a block away from the Parr residence because apparently Joanne was having a 4th of July lakeside brunch to kick off the holiday celebration when all this lunacy happened. The officer tells us as we walk that not only did her immediate family watch her die, but so did most of her closest friends. Naturally, Joanne's brunch guests are a little too distraught to move their cars or drive anywhere, so long story short, everyone stayed and it's a little longer walk for us. No biggie. It's just a little strange to walk this far with a stretcher in a neighborhood like this. And with all these cars, I'd expect to see more people, but no. I wonder where everyone is. Probably all huddled up inside. I doubt they're out back playing in the lake. I feel my dress shirt sticking to my shoulders, cold and wet as we pass the police cars and sedans on the street. How am I this sweaty? I really want to complain or say something sharp to showcase my annoyance about the walk to Lindsay and the officer, like, they knew we were coming, right? Then I think about seeing the back of my grandmother's skull exploding while I'm finishing the last bite of an everything cream cheese bagel. Yeah, I probably wouldn't want to move my car either, so I keep my mouth shut. I look down at my arm and notice a couple pieces of Carter's hair on the sleeve of my suit jacket. That dog and his hair. We follow the officer off the road and up a cobblestone path running alongside a 2-story white vinyl-sided lake home with navy blue storm shutters. This must be the place. It's now hitting me that I'm about to see a woman who's been killed by fireworks. That must have been so loud. I wonder how much of her skull is left. I wonder if her eyes are open. I wonder what happened to her coffee cup. We get to the back gate and the officer starts to unlatch the gate mechanism but stops and turns to look at Lindsay and I. Some of the family and friends have been sitting on the screened-in porch watching our investigation, so you're probably going to have an audience. The officer looks directly at me and says, "Don't screw up." He turns to finish unlatching the gate. I shrug my shoulders at Lindsay. "What the fuck was that about?" "You heard him," she said. We pull the stretcher through the fence line and enter the backyard. I can hear the lake now, all the sounds, waves, boats, and music. It's faint, but persistent. I can't quite make out what song it is. Just thump, thump, thump. The officer points to the center of the yard toward the shoreline. He points to what just looks like a bunch of white sheets bundled up laying in the grass surrounded by lawn chairs. That's Mrs. Parr, I guess. We lift the stretcher off the cobblestone and onto the lawn. As previously stated, these stretchers aren't made for extreme off-road use. Little grass won't hurt us. It just might make it a little bumpier for Joanne on the way out, though. As we get closer, I turn my head to the right and take a look at the back of the house. Big mistake. Not the house. The architecture is sound and probably one of the nicer homes on this side of the lake. It's what's inside the house that bothered me. Dozens of sets of eyes meeting my gaze. None of them seemed very friendly or inviting. They all had the same look on their faces. Shock. I guess none of these people woke up this morning thinking they were going to see involuntary manslaughter lakeside. I certainly didn't. I turn my face away from the house toward the lake and whisper loud enough for Lindsay to hear. "Did you see him?" "Yes. Stay focused," she says without looking back. I break into a full flop sweat under my clothes when I realize that we're going to have to make this removal while Joanne's friends and family watch. This backyard feels exactly what our chapel feels like during visitation. Sad and still. It's quite the vibe. The rest of the lake didn't get the memo, though. Fireworks crack off in the distance. They break my concentration long enough for me to forget that I have an audience of grieving eyes watching me across the yard. The song I couldn't quite make out ends abruptly. The person down the shoreline throwing the party must have turned off the music when they spotted us in the backyard with the stretcher. How thoughtful. Clearly it's a sign of decency and respect. I think about my hillbilly neighbors. They wouldn't be this respectful. Almost at the same time I'm having this thought, Who Let the Dogs Out by the Baja Men starts to blare and echo through all the yards and over the water. Remember what I said about those people having decency and respect? I was wrong. Lindsay gives me a look like, what is happening right now? Are we really going to have to listen to this song while we make a removal? A family on jet skis speeds by, unaware of what's happening on the shore. A little boy riding on the back of one of the jet skis gawks at us from his seat. Mikey Stevens pops into my head for a moment. I wonder how many people saw him blow his hand off. At least one, I would hope. It would be a shame to lose several fingers and have no one around to see it. I think Lindsay's wrong. Little Mikey Stevens is not an urban legend. My friend Matt knows the Stevens family and he said it's true. But he also said that Tim Burton is his uncle. So, the stretcher bounces practically in sync with the Baja Men over the patchy, sodded lawn. We pull the stretcher into the circle of lawn chairs and park it right next to the bundle of sheets. There's one beige lawn chair out of the circle that has a copious amount of blood and some fleshy matter soaking into its canvas back and seat. Okay, so I think we know where Joanne was sitting. I lean to look at the chair and try and figure out if the matter was brain, skin, or bone. There's too much freestanding blood in the chair to tell. There's a white ceramic coffee cup with the phrase "World's Coolest Grandma" laying in the grass by the foot of the chair. Ugh, what a bummer. I follow the trail of blood through the grass with my eyes to where Joanne is laying under an oversized sheet. I make a mental note to watch my step and move the stretcher into place. Lindsay and I lowered the stretcher to its lowest position, 6 or 7 inches from the ground. We do this so we don't have to break our backs picking up the body, but from the looks of the bulge under the sheet next to the stretcher, I don't think we'll have to worry about throwing our backs out today. We unzip the plush cot cover and unbuckle the safety belts that are holding down an extra disaster pouch to the stretcher. The seat belts are there to secure a body from moving around too much while in transit. The last thing you would ever want to have happen is to reassure a family that you're going to take amazing care of their loved one and immediately dump them off the side of the cot on your way out. I haven't dumped any bodies off a stretcher yet, and I don't plan on it happening today. Or, well, any other day for that matter. Lindsay and I discreetly pull out our heavy-duty blue surgical gloves out of a pocket inside the stretcher's pouch and put them on. I look down the shoreline to see if I can see the cannon that caused all this. I don't see any cannons or anything resembling what I think a cannon should look like. I bet the cannon and the guy who fired it must already be at the police station, right? Lindsay, standing near the head of the body, says, "Hey, switch me places. My lower back is bothering me today." I gulp when I realize what saying yes to this means. Switching places with Lindsay implies that I'll be at the business end of this death call, meaning I'll not only have to carry most of Joanne's body weight, not a problem, but I'll also have to support her head with my hands so the weight of her skull doesn't snap her neck in the wrong direction when we pick the rest of her body up. Alright, I got this. I've made removals and done head support a bunch of times in the past, but it's always been someone in their bed without the back of their head blown open. I've never touched an open, fatal head wound before. What a way to celebrate my independence. I figure if I make a C with my hand, I should be able to support her head around the damage so I don't have to touch anything ultra gross. Lindsay and I switch position as the second or third verse of Who Let the Dogs Out starts. This must be an extended dance remix. I've never heard this part before. What an awful song to accompany this experience. I look down at Joanne's body at my feet. Wow, she's tiny, but I can still make out a nose, shoulders, hips, and feet under the sheet. There are several spots of vibrant red blood about the size of nickels and dimes around Mrs. Parr's head. Not as much as I expected considering the nature of her injury. Lindsay and I kneel next to the body. She says, "Alright, we're just gonna tuck the excess sheet around her, get underneath and raise her up to the cot. Cool?" "Cool," I say back to her, a little disappointed. All this, the drive, the explanation, the extended dance remix of Who Let the Dogs Out, and I don't even get to look under the sheet and see what kind of condition Mrs. Parr is in here at the scene. That's the most interesting part. A dead body where it shouldn't be. I only saw a little blood in the chair and a dab on the sheet, but no exposed brain or skull. Nothing. I can't just take a peek. I guess the family's watching, and it might seem a little weird if two people they've never seen before are gawking at their dead family member under a sheet instead of removing the body in an expedited and professional fashion. I look up toward the house about 20-25 feet away and see faces basically pressed up against the window watching us, watching Joanne, waiting. I can't make out much detail because of the glare. I can only see eyes. Lindsay says, "All right, let's go." We squat down next to the body. Both Lindsay and I tuck the loose ends of the sheet around Mrs. Parr's warm, limp body. When I slide the sheet under her head, it feels warm and slippery. I think I managed to tuck the sheet without feeling the hole. Thank God. I pull my left hand out from under her head. My fingers are covered in blood. There are also a few flecks of recently cut grass stuck to the blood on my glove. Lindsay slides her arms underneath Mrs. Parr's upper thighs and butt. This is my cue to move. There isn't much time to think about what I'm doing next. I put my right arm under Mrs. Parr's back and then place my blood-covered left hand in its supportive C shape around what I think is the back of Mrs. Parr's skull, and I lift. As soon as weight is applied, I feel my hand slip out of its rigid C shape, and I feel my pinky, ring, and middle fingers slide into a wet, warm, disgusting hole. My fingers stopped abruptly when they hit something smooth and spongy. Oh my God, I'm touching her brain. Lindsay says, "All right, let's move her over." Fuck, I have no other choice but to firm up my grip and move Mrs. Parr off the ground and over to the stretcher. As we're moving her body, I can feel all the pieces of Mrs. Parr's head rubbing against my gloved fingers. Some parts are rougher and firmer than others. I look up at the house and make eye contact with a person standing 6 inches from a window in the screened-in porch. This is so uncomfortable. This is no way to spend the 4th of July. I guess this is probably why you wouldn't want to have a visitation on a day like today. We gently lower Mrs. Parr onto the stretcher and buckle her in. After she's secured on the stretcher, we took off our gloves in the same discreet fashion we put them on, attempting to avoid eye contact with the family members inside the house. It feels like Lindsay and I are at the zoo, but not as visitors, as the exhibits. The feeling of being watched, especially when you're pretending not to notice, is a very uncomfortable feeling. I look down on the ground where Mrs. Parr was laying. There's a pool of blood and small pieces of matter already being scoured by ants. Who Let the Dogs Out finally ends. It's quiet now. Lying in bed that night next to my dog Carter, I'm left alone to replay the day in my head. Who Let the Dogs Out has been bouncing around my brain on repeat since Lindsay and I left the lake this afternoon. Not the whole song, just the first line, over and over. My hillbilly neighbors across the street never stopped partying this afternoon. It's still going, and there's a lot more people there. Muffled music and bottle rockets have been cutting through my shut window for the last half hour. Carter and I are both annoyed. He's practically laying on top of me, trembling. He doesn't like fireworks. And truthfully, after not seeing what I saw today, it's safe to say that I completely underestimated the scariness of fireworks and explosives. A new country song starts across the street, followed by the sound of a string of bottle rockets launching into the sky with a whistle. I giggle at myself, remembering the look on Lindsay's face when I asked her about Mikey Stevens. Oh my God, I can't wait to tell everyone that the Mikey Stevens story is an urban legend. And I really can't wait to tell everyone about Joanne Parr. My friends on the cross-country team won't believe it. I turn off my lamp on the end table next to my bed and snuggle up next to Carter with my eyes closed. Thump. Thump, thump. Again, it's so persistent, it's nauseating. Instead of getting angry, though, like earlier in the day, delaying my sleep even further, I just imagine how satisfying it would be to hear one large explosion across the street, followed by my dad barging into my room for the 3rd time today, to tell me that our neighbors and their party guests were blown to pieces all over their front yard and carport. I'm imagining a blood-soaked Jeff Gordon flag flapping in the wind. Joanne's tiny frame covered by a sheet flashes into my brain. I think about the eyes from the porch staring at me and the sweat and panic they induced. The overpowering sense memory of what my fingers felt rubbing against Mrs. Parr's brain gives me chills. My middle, ring, and pinky finger on my left hand twitch involuntarily when my brain plays through the sensation of spongy resistance inside her head. I eventually drift off to sleep, but as I do, there's one question that keeps popping into my head from this afternoon's death call. arguably the most important question I've yet to ask myself today. Who let the dogs out? Who? My name is Grant, and these are my funeral home stories. Hopefully you enjoyed this entry. If you did, please rate and review wherever you listen, and be sure to tell a friend. You have no idea how much that helps. Follow me on social media at Pomo and Kitsch, and check out my album Fetch by Pomo and Kitsch, available on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to music. Thanks for listening.